Okay, so there's a lot of fear out there around people not being able to make their rent. You may have seen headlines where 30% of people can't make their rent and within a month everyone's going to be kicked out of their homes. Well, if that were to happen, it would be really scary because let's say 1 in 3 people who rent are kicked out. Now they can't go anywhere, or they have to move in with their parents or find an impromptu roommate. And now landlords don't have anyone in their houses, but they can't really release them because all of the people who need to rent a place can't afford a place because they just got kicked out. It would be pandemonium. Homelessness would go way up and you just have like tons of people out on the streets in theory. Well, I wanted to run an experiment to see how close we actually were to this. Now, I'm going to compare some national numbers to some numbers where I just asked some of my local friends and landlords about what their occupancy rates were like and who was deficient or late on their payments versus who was paying. So if you want to find out those numbers, stick around and I'll let you know what I found. Okay, so what really started all of this for me was an article that I read in CNBC where it said that 30% of people missed their housing payment in June. Well, here we are in August, but way back in June, that was still a scary number, and a lot has happened since then. And it really all started with this apartment list study. Okay, so headlines are everything when it comes to news articles, and if you look closely, that 30% was probably pulled from this stat where it said 37% of renters and 26% of homeowners were at least somewhat worried about not making their payment in the next month. So does that mean they actually didn't make their payment or that they were somewhat worried? So now you can take that 37% and say like, oh my gosh, 26 and 37 average out to 30, so 30% of people can't make their payment. When really it just means that they were somewhat worried, at least according to this article. Also, keep in mind those are national numbers and they aggregate everything all over the nation, so it doesn't strictly apply to your hometown. Now, I'm most interested in Austin, so I wanted to see, hey, what are the local numbers and do they really reflect this national stat? So here we are in August, and instead of going to CNBC, I decided to go straight to the study on apartment list. And in August, they claim that 32% of renters are entering August with unpaid housing bills. Okay, now the devil is in the details, and even though 1/3 of Americans entered August with unpaid housing bills, a full 90% of them were able to get current by the end of the month. So this shows that most renters are stretching their budgets and they're working with their landlords to get payments made, throughout the month. So people aren't on time, which is a little different than, hey, people can't make their payments at all. Still something to be worried about, but the titles and the headlines stretch the actual truth a little bit, so you do need to look under the covers. And of course, oddly enough, 32% of Americans are accumulating debt by missing their housing payments. So maybe people are making their payments even though they're stretching it out a bit, but they're accumulating debt along the way. So it's a matter of how long can renters hold out with debt to cover their housing payments and their rent until things recover and they kind of get back to normal. It is kind of telling that the percentage that are taking on debt is the same percentage that are in trouble with their housing payment. Okay, so according to CNBC, 28 million Americans face eviction. Okay, so that's roughly 1 in 11 people, and I gotta look at a sheet here because there's just too many numbers to talk about out of my head. But if you assume that the average household is 2.6 people, then that's 28 million Americans, right? And that could be 10.7 million households out of the total 128.6 million households in the United States, which would be 8.3%. Now, personally, I think that that would be like a horrible move if we had to evict 8.3% of the population. That would just be total pandemonium and chaos. But again, I'm not the government. I know that somewhere in the stack, someone's gonna have to lose out, whether it's the renters or the landlords or people issuing the debt. Someone is gonna be left holding the bag wherever that falls. So I'm hoping that the economy can recover and we could find a solution to the virus that makes people feel safe enough to go back to work so that this could be, resolved without having to evict, 8% of the population. However, those stats are national stats, and so now I wanted to compare that to what I'm actually seeing here in Austin. So I ran a little experiment where I asked landlord friends of mine, hey, how many rental units do you have? How many are current and how many are delinquent? Just to see if Austin matched those national numbers. So this is not a perfect study by any means. People could lie about the numbers. It could be that people who reported the numbers just happen to have more paying or less paying tenants. So the data is certainly not complete. However, I thought that it would be relevant to run just to see how close it was. So if I get enough data, you would figure like, well, 30% should have to impact those numbers somewhat, and we should see some delta off of what normal would be considered. And here are the numbers that I found. So are you a landlord? If so, what percentage of your rentals are facing late payments? I'd love to know in the comments below. Do your numbers match national numbers, or are they better or worse? Okay, so I asked landlords that I knew across a bunch of Facebook groups that I'm in, how many rentals do you have, how many are current, and how many are past due? I had 53 respondents, which is, some number. It's not a ton, but it's still a pretty decent number. And those 53 landlords represented 1,176 rental units. And out of those 1,176 rental units, all of which were in Austin, that was a pre-requirement, assuming everyone was telling the truth, only 21 were deficient or late. Now, that is 1.8% of all of those units are late here in Austin. Now, when you compare that to those national numbers of 30 and 26% for homeowners and 37% for renters, like that is really far off. That is nowhere near 30%. So I would imagine that if that were really a local issue, that those numbers would be at least somewhat closer. I mean, 1.8% is kind of like your regular humdrum, May in any given year, much less in the middle of coronavirus. So I don't know if Austin is just a special place or if the data really doesn't represent the full Austin market, which is a very big possibility. But I did find it interesting that out of almost 1,200 units, only 21 were delinquent. I would have expected it to be much higher. So I was pleasantly surprised to see it only at 1.8%. So take it for what it's worth. I'd love to know what you think about that number in the comments below. Hey, thanks for watching this video. I hope you got some value out of it. If you like the video, please press that little like button and turn it blue, and subscribe for more videos that I release every week. Thanks so much for watching, and until the next crisis, just hang on. I'm sure there's another one around the corner.